guys? Welcome back to Strong Successful Male. So for today, I'm going to do a very educational and entertaining email that was sent from a subscriber. This from a guy, sounds like he's probably about my age, late 40s. He's a lawyer by trade, specifically specializing in planning, estate, and the trust field. And he's writing in to really address the issue of prenups. As you can imagine, he watches this channel. He's heard lots of stories about prenups, how they backfired and everything. And he really wanted to write in and set the record straight based on his experience here. So this really will help out a lot of guys. And he's going to use a lot of examples from clients he's had right now and over the years, obviously with fake names, of course, to keep their identity safe, to shed some light on the whole thing. So this is a really good one to help guys out. And I might add, this dude is very good sense of humor, so the way he writes here is pretty darn funny. And oh, by the way, guys, I did my homework here because in the email, he had his credentials, which I'm not going to tell you who he is, and I was able to look it up and match the email with his law office emails and see who he is. So this guy's for real. So I did my homework on this. I did my checking. So it's definitely going to be worth your time. So he says here, Dear SSM, thank you for the information and help you provide men in their relationships. I've been watching your channels for a few years now, and there are a lot of lessons both men and women can get from your content. Well, bro, thank you for your support on all the channels. I happen to be a planning attorney by trade, mainly in the estate and trust field, which basically means I get people to pay me marginally well to set things up ahead of time, so they or their estates don't have to pay legal fees out the butt later on for cleaning up a mess. Basically, I do legal oil changes and tune-ups rather than rebuild blown engines because they didn't bother to change their car's oil for 200,000 miles. I keep hearing a lot about prenups on your channel as well as others, and there's a very mistaken belief that prenups will get thrown out just because a judge's whim. Even worse, I hear a lot of men moaning and groaning about how they had their bank accounts vacuumed by a court because the judge always sides with the women. While there are a few judges out there that are like that, the vast majority of judges stick to the law and the facts. Hear what he said right there? Vast majority stick to the law and the facts. But he did acknowledge some do what they want. It's the misinformation and the mistaken beliefs around prenups that are screwing over men more than the actual judges. Well, there's plenty of misinformation out there. When prenups fail, it's usually because the men trying to use them don't understand what prenups are or how they work. Many men treat prenups like they are Link from the original Legend of Zelda going into the shop to purchase a shield from an old man. Dude, I know how old you are by you bringing that up. Legend of Zelda, the first one for the original Nintendo in the mid-'80s, that was one of my favorite games of all time. That is I can hear the music in my head right now. That, Double Dragon, Contra, Super Mario 3. Yeah, the good old days. You can tell how old I am here. They think they're buying some magical talisman against the bad effects of a divorce. It's dangerous to go alone. Take this. A prenup is a contractual agreement for the marriage that describes how the marriage is supposed to work, including how bills are to be paid, how chores are divided, where they are expected to live, whether or not paternity tests will be used when kids come along, and even what religion the children will be raised in. It also addresses what assets are to remain separate and what assets are to going into joint accounts. If a prenup only addresses what happens with alimony and asset division when a marriage ends, it probably costs less than $80 a year. It probably costs less than the 80-year-old, 300-pound lady of the evening, and you should expect to get screwed worse than she came at you with a 14-inch strap-on. This is where I should mention a few things I've learned over my decades as a lawyer and human being. Number one. Most people will look for the easiest sounding solution rather than what works best, and they get what they pay for. Well, that does not surprise me in the least. Most people in this world are fucking lazy and cheap, and they rather get paid the smallest amount of money possible, and, well, yeah, they get what they pay for. Shit. Instead of, doing their homework and finding what's right for them and taking the time to, get the right lawyer, do the research, and pay accordingly to protect their ass later in time. Number two, people will actually argue with me as the attorney because somehow they think they know better because they did a Google search and their gym buddy's cousin's barista's dog walker got divorced using a simple downloaded form and they did just fine. And 3, people rarely follow through on a game plan unless they are pushed, because they get lazy over time and blow off annual tasks and meetings with their attorneys. Nothing you said there surprises me. Many of the men who gripe and groan about how prenups are worthless because a judge will just randomly throw it out are the same men who download the free prenup template from the internet. They fill it out with crayon 2 days before the wedding and shove it under the bride-to-be's nose before lining up to walk down the aisle with a demand to sign this or the wedding's off. Then they cry and scream after their wife hasn't worked in years with their permission. She ends up cheating with his entire fantasy football league, except the short, smelly guy named Mitch. And then the husband ends up on the hook for alimony and has to move out of the family home and the wife's OnlyFans studio, but still pay the mortgage. The prenup wasn't thrown out because the judge was biased against men. It was thrown out because the prenup was handled in a ridiculously sloppy manner. Okay, this is a professional, guys. He's laying it out here. And you can't at all deny that people can be fucking lazy. You know, and go for the cheapest option. He says, here's a story about a client of mine who asked me about the next marriage and protecting himself since his current divorce. He was already getting screwed down harder than the bolts holding down the chair on the set of The Biggest Loser. This story will also show why prenups should be looked at as a strategic plans that need to be followed through on, and will always show why many cheap prenups go down quicker than a fat kid on a seesaw. He says, I've been the long-time planning attorney for this client's family. And he wanted some advice on the next wife. Apparently, he was already going through a divorce that was almost final. And he was basically losing far more than he should have. And he wanted to know how to protect himself when he gets married the next time. The next time, and he's already getting screwed royally on this first time? Smack! Why the hell would he want to go through this shit all over again? Honest to God. But you're making money. Says here, for religious reasons, he would never just sleep or live with a woman, but he definitely didn't want to go without it, since it had already been years since he got any from his almost ex-wife. So yes, he wasn't even divorced yet, didn't actually have anybody in mind to become Mrs. Number 2, but yet he was set on going overseas to find the next bride. Well, good luck to him. He says, I know you want to give this client of mine a smack, but I'm not going to pass judgment on his religious beliefs, which really are sincere, since it isn't my place to put my personal sensibilities above his religion. It's also important to note that the rest of the family got married in largely the same way, without prenups, and those marriages seem to be doing just fine. Well, I already gave him a smack, and in my opinion, he deserves a smack. and as for his family members, wonderful. I'm glad it's going well. But guess what? There's still time. But that's me because I'm a cynical 47-year-old. He just drew the short straw in the spousal Powerball lottery, and he wants a prenup strategy because he doesn't want to pick the wrong numbers and lose once again. The guy says here, in reality, a prenup is just a strategic plan for a marriage with terms and conditions that need to be executed regularly and without fail. It is also only one piece of what can be an extremely effective, comprehensive strategy for those men and women who want to protect themselves. Here is what I told my client. Okay, now we're getting into the nuts and bolts of these things. He says, I can create a prenuptial agreement, but she needs to have her own attorney. And this needs to be a negotiated contract with give and take before settling on a final version. Right there, you guys have probably heard a lot of times, the guy has his own attorney, she has her attorney, there's negotiating and blah, 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 to the final one. We've heard this before, at least I have. He says, why is this? Judges will put aside a prenup if they're convinced the person who didn't really understand what the agreement was and how it worked, which is exactly what happens with downloaded forms without an attorney, or only the husband has an attorney and the wife did not. It's tough for a wife to claim she didn't know what she was signing if she had her own attorney. Okay, makes sense to me. I get it. Now the question is, what if she doesn't want to get her own attorney? What if the guy wants to do this and have his own attorney, and he wants her to have her own attorney, but she's like, nope, I'm not getting my own attorney. Then what do you do? Making the feigned ignorance argument while having her own attorney is like the 4-year-old with chocolate smeared all over her face saying they didn't eat the Hershey bar. Nobody believes them. Next, The prenup needs to be completely executed at least 3 months before the marriage. Okay, none of this night before walking down the aisle shit. At least 3 months. My client cannot go overseas, bring back a fiance, and then have the prenup signed just before the wedding march, only 2 weeks from setting foot back in the States. Why? Prenups get thrown out because it was sprung on the wife at the last minute during the hustle and bustle of the last weeks before the wedding. Now, the wife can successfully argue they were under a lot of stress at the time, and the groom was threatening to walk away if she didn't sign it. So the judge will rule that there was duress. Okay, but if it's done 3+ months before the wedding, that's a different ballgame. But she could still complain and say, I was stressed, duress, because I'm sure a lot of guys out there who are watching this are married or were married at the time, and they knew how worked up their fiance was 3+ months before the wedding. But still, I guarantee she'll still try to get out of this shit. And contracts signed under duress are routinely thrown out more often than HOEs used underwear from the local dollar store. In addition, the fact that she would be coming into a foreign country on a fiancé visa and could be instantly deported if circumstances change would also lead to the prenup being tossed away like an empty soda can. Holy shit. So guys, already, we're not even close to being done yet. You can see why it's important to get the right attorney and the right advice and listen to your attorney. But I still say, what if she says, I don't want to sign it, or I don't want to get my own attorney? Next, he says, the agreement needs to be comprehensive and outline everyone's ongoing duties in the marriage. It shouldn't just contain terms about what happens if the marriage fails. This is a very interesting point. Especially if you have two people get married that are different religions. Yeah, what religion is the kid going to have, or kids, and all sorts of other shit. Why? A prenup should address how bills are paid, what each person should contribute, how money is to be spent, and on what, and everyone should stick to the plan. If the plan is both spouses can contribute a set amount or a set percentage of their earnings to the household budget, then that's what needs to happen. If the wife decides she wants to quit her job and just work part-time, then the husband needs to hold her contribution commitment in the prenup, or they need to formally change the agreement with both using their own attorneys. Oh man, I can only imagine that drama. You don't love me. I want to quit my job. And now, you want me to go to the lawyer. God almighty. Call me crazy, but I think it's better off to remain single than do all this bullshit. God, but a lot of guys are going to get married, so I'm going to cover this. If the prenup states the wife is responsible for cleaning the upstairs of the house, and the husband handles downstairs, but she stops cleaning altogether, then she needs to be called out on it, or the prenup gets challenged. If she's not living up to her obligations under the prenup, then walk away. Well, I don't think most guys have the balls to do that. Or if they have the balls to do that, they want to hurt the kids and get divorced over it. And I'm sure the wives will test these guys. Like, oh, I stopped vacuuming upstairs. Next thing you know, I'm going to stop doing the toilets upstairs. And next thing you know, I'm going to stop doing this. He hasn't said anything yet. If you keep letting things go in the prenup slide, then it doesn't matter if your wife ends up sleeping in a rotation with all the players of your local minor league baseball team. A judge can simply throw out the prenup divorce provisions because no one was following the marriage provisions anyway. So there you go. She can stop living up to her end of the agreement, and the guy doesn't call her on it, and then the judge is like, well, what a fucking hassle, guys, but I'm sharing this. You can't expect to have a rule against your kid begging for toys every time you go to Target. Your kid begs anyway, and 3 times a week the kid comes home with a toy from Target. At that point, you're the one who cares if you bitch about spending so much money on toys. It's your own damn fault for not enforcing a rule for your kid, and it's also your fault for letting a spouse slide on their marriage commitments under the prenup. Next, he says, the prenup should also specifically state what funds belong to which person, what debts belong to which person, and how separating assets are treated going forward. There should only be one joint operating account for the household. You contribute what you're supposed to into that joint account, and then everything else gets invested separately. Okay. I like he's mentioning this part about just one joint account to contribute the money in to pay the bills and shit. He says, do not mix other funds. Don't pay the other's individual bills with your money, and for the love of Chris Hemsworth protein shakes, don't put any inheritance into a joint account or asset. My primary law practice is trust and estate planning, and I see my clients' adult children do this crap all the time. Here is a very common Hindenburg-level disaster scenario. Now listen to this part. He says, so the husband's parents die, leaving him a bunch of money. The wife starts whispering in his ear that now we can buy that dream house we've always wanted, which may or may not come with promises to get freaky in every room in the house. They get a real estate agent and start looking at houses. And when the agent asks about a mortgage, the wife boldly answers they are paying in cash. The closing attorney sees that the house buyers are married, so they naturally put both names on the deed for the closing. And then the husband was stupid enough to not to correct it. A year or two after moving into the dream house, the wife takes up with her personal trainer and starts working out with him 4 days a week from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. long after the gym is closed. She then asks the husband for a divorce, and she demands half the house. The husband complains that all the money came from his parents' inheritance, and she tells him her divorce attorney says she'll get half because he commingled the inheritance in the house. There you go. And there you go, knocking personal trainers again. Not all of us are banging our female clients. Although I work with some trainers that did do that, yes. He says here, and she's right. She probably is getting half the house because it was not the husband's separate property. And he intentionally put her name on the deed. He says, by the way, sorry for the personal trainer reference, since I know you used to be one. But not really. I used to feel bad about making personal trainers the villain in these scenarios until this actually happened to one of my best friends when his marriage broke up a few years ago. Now, these unethical personal trainers can dip themselves in honey and streak through a wild boar preserve for all I care. Yeah. Again, not all personal trainers are banging their clients. Look, I'm going to set the record straight. I was a trainer for 7 years. 2 years at the gym, learning the ropes, 5 years on my own in-home personal training. 78% of my clients were women because guys simply don't want to pay for things they feel they can do on their own. And of the clients I had gals that range from like mid-20s to 70s. And I had female clients that were single, in a relationship, engaged, married, divorced, and widowed. And not one of them did I ever hook up with. Certainly not the ones past 50. And there were some good-looking ones. And believe me, in another time and place, I like to bang some of them. But I wasn't going to fuck up my business, but other guys would. Anyhow. He says, why? I think I pretty much explained why these assets need to be kept separate. But the biggest threat to the overall separation of property in a prenup is being lazy and just going along with what the wife says to keep the peace in the family. Right there, what he just said. And how many guys are going to do that? When she starts insisting that he puts his separate money into the joint account to make it easier to buy stuff for the house of the kids, from there, it's a more slippery slope than a slip and slide coated with astrolube going down the side of a mountain. Since a prenup is basically a strategic plan, it should be updated and re-signed every 3 to 5 years, as the same way business strategic plans are. The press often creates a controversy around President Trump and Melania sitting down to revise their prenup regularly, but this is actually a good idea that will keep a prenup enforceable. Well, I'm sure that guy certainly enforces his prenup. He says, why? Again, judges are more likely to throw a prenup that was just signed once 25 years ago, saying that the circumstances completely changed compared to a prenup from 25 years ago that was updated and re-signed 6 times over the years. Well, that's interesting. That I did not know. I went over all this with my client, but I offered one more solid piece of advice, which was to put all his separate property into a domestic asset protection trust, with his brother as the trustee, and then going forward, any money not mandated to be put into the joint account for the household goes into the trust. Okay, makes sense to me. In addition, the prenup should disclose the existence of the trust, that he has every right to put his separate assets into it, and the wife-to-be has no claim on the trust assets. Like I said with the inheritance before, one way that men and women get taken out back and beaten behind the financial woodshed in a divorce is by mixing and mingling their money with their spouse. And then they get shocked like with a Pikachu face when they lose half of the mingled property. Okay. I told you guys this was good and worth your time if you're still listening at this point, even though you had to listen to me ramble on about being my personal trainer days. You can't accidentally commingle your excess paycheck if you routinely put the balance into your trust where only your brother can get at it for you and protect those assets and investments in the event of a divorce. Remember, the brother is the trustee. Make that clear. And believe me, it's a lot tougher for a judge to reach into an irrevocable trust with an independent trustee with the sole discretion to make distributions or not. So what happened after I laid out all this for my client? I got a lot of pushback and suggestions for shortcuts that wouldn't work. Just like I said, most people do, and he asked the following. Here are the questions. Number 1, can't you just type up a prenup and I get her to sign it? 2, does she really need to get her own attorney? Can't you just do the agreement for both of us? 3, can't I just download a form from the internet and use that? 4, can't I just be the trustee of my own revocable trust and get the same protection? And the answer to all that is no, 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 and no. But this is what he gets. Like I said, people usually look for the quick and easy answer. I was a strong no on all those questions, and I told him if he wanted the protection, they needed to do the work. It's not rocket science to me, guys. I believe I'm above average intelligence, but I'm no fucking genius, and I can understand his point here to all these things. I'm sure there's people way more intelligent than me that probably would be like trying to download the thing from the internet and get the cheapest option and get out of everything. I would have suggested not getting married at all and just dating, but like I said, for religious reasons, he was just not going to go out and have fun with women. Marriage was the only option for him if he wanted to have relations ever again. Well, it's his life, it's his business, to each your own, particularly you religious guys out there, but there's a price. Fortunately, knowing this client, and more importantly, knowing his brother and the rest of the family, there's a better than even chance that he will actually implement a solid prenup strategy if he does decide to import a new bride. And if he's smart about it, he won't end up with a 50% tariff on everything he owns, with this particularly import if the marriage doesn't work out. Well, good luck to your client. He says, SSM, like I said, I'm a planning attorney, so I often come with a different perspective than divorce attorneys who make bank off prolonging the court process at their client's expense. Ding, ding, ding. Gee, I'm going to read that again, guys. I'm a planning attorney, so I often come from a different perspective than divorce attorneys who make bank off prolonging the court process at their client's expense. Remember that, gentlemen. I prefer to help my clients avoid problems by planning up front. Well, that makes the most sense to me. If you read this and you and your audience want, I'll be happy to send in another submission on paternity tests and how to logically approach them a lot more successfully than most men do. Yes, please send it in. The men who ask for paternity tests for the first time when their wife is 3 weeks from popping out the kid usually end up living in the car and getting lambasted by all the women in their lives for daring to suggest that his virtuous princess of a wife could ever possibly be unfaithful. Yeah, I know. All women usually balk at the idea of paternity tests, even though his wife, and his family's DNA were tested to be all African American going back 200 years. But somehow the wife popped out a starkly white ginger baby that remarkably looks like the husband's best friend, Kelly O'Reilly. Don't you trust me, she says. As SSM, thank you for all the work that you do on your channel, and I hope this helps even one person handle a prenup strategy the right way. Well, bro, thank you for writing that in. That was very good information, and it's fucking funny, and I think this will help out more than one guy, or at the very least, get guys thinking about certain things. So, gentlemen, if you're looking to get married, and I don't care how many of you guys are shaking your head saying, SSM, I'm never getting married, I guarantee you there are guys in this that watch this and watch me regularly. They're going to do it one day. Listen to what this guy says. You get what you pay for. So it means you got to pay a bunch of money to get the right things done. And he says, have your girl get her own attorney and don't just download shit from the fucking internet and write it in crayon. And I know we're exaggerating here. Do what he says. Do all the things the lawyer says. And remember, yeah, he was talking, yes, they make their money in billable hours, or they make their money on I would imagine he probably would, an attorney like this would probably tell you up front what it's probably going to cost. as opposed to a ballpark idea, I'm guessing, as opposed to like the divorce attorneys that by prolonging all the drama, they make more money. I think guys like this will pretty much tell you what the cost is going to be. It's worth it. Your future self will thank you. Or you can avoid all this shit together, and you know how, as you stay a bachelor. Because sadly, the world we're in right now doesn't work too well for the guy, and it's a great deal for the girl getting married, but not so much the guy. I mean, listen to all this shit he said you have to deal with in the marriage. Even after you got all the stuff in the prenups done right, and listen to the lawyer, and she got her attorney, and you did this, and you did that, you still got to make sure she cleans the upstairs bathroom, and if she starts deviating from that, and you don't check her on it, which will probably create a lot of fucking drama. My back hurts. My tooth hurts. Whatever. Then the judge can say, hey, you weren't enforcing the other things, and, well, none of this else stands. So there's a lot of shit involved. But if you go down this path, listen to your attorney. That's all I can say. All right, guys, that's it for today. Be sure to comment down below. Let me know what you think about this. If you like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe. I'll catch you next time.